Welcome to the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may have missed, with your hosts AJ Kuti and Jason Gordon. Welcome back. Welcome back to the show. We are the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may have prepared you for. As always, I'm AJ, sitting across from me, my astute co-host, Jason. Jason, how you doing?
Doing pretty well, AJ. Thank you for calling me astute. Not everybody calls me that.
Honestly, I don't even know really what that word means. I just heard it somewhere, and it sounded prestigious, and it kind of...
I think it means you pay attention, and that is not my strong suit sometimes.
Oh, okay, so I did use that wrong. I do that a lot. Do you ever use words wrong?
All the time. Absolutely. And, you know, have you ever seen that meme or that little thing where somebody says a word where they just kind of like mumble their way through it, right?
Oh, yeah.
So trying to have you pick up on what I'm saying.
Have you seen the video? This is the greatest video of the weather woman.
No.
And so I can't remember where she is in the U.S., but she was trying to say that there was going to be some precipitation coming. And she would say, there's some participation. And then she kept catching herself. And somebody was trying to help her out. And it's precipitation. And she kept saying participation. Finally, she goes, it's going to rain. And I was like, that's so me. Because I try to use big words and never use them right. And I just go back to the elementary words.
I always think of Mike Tyson. I'm just going to fade into Bolivia.
Well, in this episode, we're going to kind of continue on with what we talked about last week, last week we talked about personality tests within a career. We're going to be looking at how to choose a career, the steps that you can take or things that you can consider when choosing a career, your personal motivations and stuff like that. So how does that sound to you?
Sounds good. Before we do, remind everybody, hit us up on the socials, reach out to us on the website. Just visit our website if nothing else. We got a lot of stuff on there. And let us know what you want to hear about.
Well, today for our quick question, we're going to get a little personal. I think the listeners like to hear kind of our stories a little bit. How did you choose your current career?
Oh, well, it's one of those things. I had no idea. So I didn't have a lot of exposure to different professional careers growing up. So I kind of fumbled around in different things and more than anything figured out things I didn't like. Now I was very fortunate. I had the opportunity to do that. A lot of people take on responsibility earlier on and they are never able to fully understand the things about themselves that are going to align well with a given job or career path. And, but I did. All right. I started studying one thing in college and realized that didn't align with my personality type and things like that. I switched to something else, but realized that wouldn't necessarily give me the goals and fulfillments that I wanted to. I ended up going to law school and thought I was going to pursue some type of career like that. And after working in a couple of different legal offices, a private firm and then a corporate legal office, I realized I wanted something different. I thought I wanted to, the adventure and everything like that associated with the military. But I got a lot of wonderful, amazing experiences, but the way the environment is structured, right? The highly structured, highly supervised, not a lot of room for creativity type environment, just didn't fit with my personality type. I found myself not motivated and not engaged to be there long term. And so I had to change again, right? And, I pursued business as a career and found a ton of motivation in startups, and less so in building the startups myself as to helping people build them. I figured out I love that project, right? And then education was always there. I came from a family without a great deal of education. I was a very poor student early on in my life. Right. But being around education, I first started in college. I taught Spanish conversation classes as a professor's assistant. And I really fell in love with education, and it was always there. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to do it while I was in the Army. I wanted to do it afterwards. I was a professor's assistant in my business school program while I was going through it. And then, the opportunity came up, right? I started searching for opportunities where I could enter the education field, and an opportunity came up, and I landed my first job, and I'm in education. I'm still at that job now, right? 10 years later, I'm still a professor. And so I stumbled around through things that I thought would be interesting because I thought the career in itself, right, would be motivating. The industry would be motivating, or the what you could achieve in it would be motivating. And then I figured out I was wrong. I didn't fully understand myself.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how I got into my career. I stumbled my way through it. Right, I had no model. I figured it out, and now I've found the perfect career for me. But how about you, AJ? How did you pick the career you're in?
So, and I've said this before, so I was in pre-med to begin with. I took 2 years of pre-med, so I got all the prereqs to go to med school. But I realized at that moment, as you get older, I think, you start to realize that priorities that you had or you have at a specific time, they change over time for obvious reasons. And, I was in college, 2 years into college, and that's when you start really getting serious about dating with the intent to marry, with the intent to have a family potentially. And I started seeing myself because I'd worked with a doctor for a couple weeks in high school just to kind of get that experience, just to see what they kind of go through and do. And I liked the idea of helping people, but I wasn't a big fan of on call. I wasn't a big fan of there's always, you always have new things coming into the office when you're a doctor, but there's a lot of monotony in that because it's just the same, you're doing the same thing over and over just for different people, with different symptoms and whatnot. But I wanted something different. At the time, my priorities I wanted something a little bit more flexible with time, a little bit more flexible with creativity, and which is odd because I went to accounting. But the teaching aspect of it gave me that flexibility. But I still wanted to have that interaction. I loved the interaction. And as I said before, I had a mentor that the camp that I work at, he helped me out. And I said, I don't know what I want to do. I just know I don't want to be a doctor anymore. And he said, what would you do if money was no options? And I said, I would work at the camp, which at the camp we teach. And he said, well, figure out how to make a career out of that. And so naturally I said, okay, well, if we teach at the camp, then I would want to teach. And then my dad was a teacher growing up. So I got the in-class experience with him because he used to take me to his class. It was a lot of fun. And I saw how much fun he could have in class. And I wanted that fun factor. So I figured, okay, I'm going to go to business. I'm going to go into business school because I know they're fairly high in demand, which one of the things that we're going to bring up today is the financial side of it. Financial side was a factor in my decision. And somebody told me, hey, teach accounting because they're so in high demand right now. You can't find one at the time. And to me, that meant, well, they get paid very well because of supply and demand. It's anything I learned in economics. And so I said, okay, I can do that. And I didn't know anything about accounting. Didn't like accounting particularly, but I figured I made the fallacy. I chose accounting because I thought I was good at math, so I'll be good at accounting. Accounting has nothing to do with math. It just does have numbers, and that's about it. But I went into there, and so I guess to come back to the question of how did I choose my career? My career that I chose was teaching. I knew I wanted to be in front of a class. It just so happened I used accounting as the vessel to get me there. If I could choose to teach anything, it probably wouldn't be accounting. Granted, I love the challenge of accounting. Accounting is just one of those difficult classes in nature in any business school you go to. So I do love the challenge, but there are other things I think I'm more passionate about, more other subjects I'm more passionate about, but the fact that I'm passionate about teaching, that's what I love to do. And so I'm with you. I'm at that career that fits me is about as good as it could possibly get.
Yeah. There you go. And you were a little bit different than me. I had to stumble my way through it, and you had a model in front of you. You saw what your dad did as a college professor, and you understood what that entailed and stuff, so there's going to be a couple of different pathways, and you and I found ourselves to a similar career, right?
We've said that before. Like, if you were to take both of our paths, they are polar opposites.
Yeah. But
yet we still came to the same outcome.
Yeah.
Literally the same outcome because we're both at the same school.
Which reinforces kind of what we're talking about today. What gets you there and what motivates you? Because personality-wise, you and I are a lot different. I mean, you tend to be way more extroverted than I am, right? I tend to be, I think, in a way, a little more diligent on something, than you are in terms of, think I tend to be more serious, right? In a way,
Oh, yeah.
Type scenario. We're so different in so many ways. I mean, we're both middle-aged white men, right? But that's
With two
about
girls.
right. And we teach in a similar job, but with backgrounds that are notably different. So anyway, I hope that resonates with the audience out there, that there is no singular personality type for a similar type career.
I also think too, I think that part of what you just said, I think is what brought us to where we are, is that we were kind of, I think you mentioned it too, we were both looking for that flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no one way to be a professor.
Right.
It is the flexibility. And I think that's such a big part to why I was driven towards this career.
And so that gives us a good jumping off point into what we're going to talk about today. And this is carrying over a bit of what we introduced in a prior episode when we started talking about individual motivation, right? Internal needs that you have. And as long as those are fulfilled, then you are content, right? And careful using the word happy. Content is, long-term level of satisfaction, right? And if you're going to have that in terms of your job environment, your job has to, in a way, provide that external motivating factor, or those factors in combination that are going to meet your internal needs. It's always going to be things you don't like, right, or don't enjoy. But overall, is it meeting those internal needs? Is it giving you that level of fulfillment that's going to result in? And it could be that you and I have different elements about the job, right? That engages us, that motivates us, that leads to that contentment, right? So that's another kind of learning point there. The external environment, that job environment, has lots of attributes. Okay. Some of them may resonate more or better with somebody than other ones. For me, the creative output, the lack of autonomy, and the I don't know, I think those are the two most, the autonomy associated with it and the ability to have a creative output were the high motivating factors. The social element might be the being in front of the classroom, being engaged, having that environment might have resonated more with you than it did with me, right? I don't know.
Let's get into the main topic, because I think this is it's going to be a good conversation. I think we're going to have, because I think we come from two different places, and I do think we have a couple different perspectives on this kind of stuff. So the first question, and you actually posed this, and I had to get to explain this a little bit more, because I was looking at it from a different way. But is there a such thing as a career path for most careers? And by that, I mean, and you had to explain this, a prospective career path. So a future forward-thinking career path. Not, obviously, if you look back, there's a path to get you where you're at. But is there a prospective career path?
So in my opinion, there is a model career path for so many things. Like you have this job, then this job, then this job, then this job. And that's what a career in this industry/field looks like. And that is not always the case. I've spoken with so many people in different organizations that, yes, their career path is exactly what you thought it would have been. Okay, they were promoted from this position to this position and this position, and it looks like what you'd read in a textbook. But I've also talked to so many people who started off in something different. What they studied in school was completely different than what they did in their first job. What they did in their third job, which ultimately became their career path, was completely unrelated to either of those type scenario. And with that being said, there's always going to be some commonalities. If you follow up an organizational structure, right, if you're going to get promoted type scenario, it is going to force you somewhat into somewhat of a pipeline. But how you arrive at any one of those points in that organizational structure is going to change and vary. Okay, you can become a CEO by founding a company. You can become a CEO by the board of directors hiring you from a different industry that you've never worked in, because you have skills and have performed well in another industry, right? History is full of that. If you've ever, studied the backgrounds of executives for certain companies and how companies were founded and things like that. Other people, start at the bottom and work their way up to the top of a company, stay in the company the whole time. Other people transfer over to a different industry or a similar company from a different company, right? And their career path up that ladder was completely different. So what I want to say is the answer is no. Do you have a target to aim for? It says, I want to move up along this career path via these jobs. You can certainly do that, right? Because, the organizational structure is what it is, and it says that this is the natural progression. Okay. But is there a single finite way to get where you want to be? And I say the answer is no, because you and I are a good example, right? I did not follow a traditional career path to be a professor. Okay. I didn't, even if I were going to be a professor of law in a law school where I'm in a business school, right? That's a less common position, far less common. But if I were to be a professor in a law school, there is kind of a predetermined career path that most people take to that. But you see professors all the time that took somewhat of a different career path to get there. Okay. So to an extent, maybe, but there are always exceptions. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree. I don't think there's a career. Well, I'm going to look at the question just a slightly different. I don't think you should focus too much on a career path because other opportunities could arise, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm afraid, like when we say, is there a career path? I do think there are people out there that have this goal in mind, which is great. They have this goal in mind, and they're so focused and narrowed in on that goal that they don't see all the other opportunities that could arise. And if that's the case, and you're content with that, that's fine. But I'm somebody of the mindset of I want to be open-minded enough to where I can see those other opportunities, and if it presents a better outcome, whatever the outcome, whatever your motivation is, then I'm open to that. I'm opening to like the Friends episode. I'm opening to pivot.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's sometimes people get so caught up in one single end result that they don't see other opportunities that could present better end results.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's because you have a family member that is doing this one specific job, and that your parent, whoever that may be, dad or mom or whatever, their parent did the job, and then their parent did the job. So it's been kind of this legacy that is expected of you to do that job. And so your end result, your end goal is that same job, whereas there may be a better opportunity somewhere that fits your personality or motivation or whatever it may be that's going to make you more content, that you're not going to see because you're so focused on that one goal.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I think you could have a singular career path. Is it beneficial? I don't know if it's beneficial because I think you could be missing out on a lot of things that could better your situation, whatever the outcome is. So,
mm-hmm. And I am a firm believer is that it's not the end goal, right? It is the journey in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But much of the journey, if you understand what you want and your current situation does not provide all of that, right? It does not fully meet your internal needs and wants, then that journey has to continue, right? And you're always in search to satisfy those things that are not satisfied. And I think all the things are never satisfied, right?
Yeah.
I think that's going to be forever the case. And if we recognize that, then we can sit back a little bit more and enjoy the hunt, enjoy the chase to motivate those things.
I will say this, and this is not on our show doc, but this is a question that, as you were talking a few minutes ago, it popped in my head, and this is kind of philosophical, and kind of deep, but I want to see what your reaction is. Is there, for you, let's just say for you from a personal standpoint, and then we can kind of grow it out for generalization, but do you have a quote unquote, I'm using air quotes for those, you can't see this, but perfect job? And when I say perfect job, I'm not saying taking bits from this job and bits from this job and creating your own job. I'm saying right now, practically speaking, so in reality, do you feel like there is one job that is absolutely spot on perfect for it, checks all the boxes off, is what I'm saying?
Yes, I really do.
Okay.
The job I have now and what I do is the closest thing in the world to I think it existing, but you could take elements of my job now and add a degree to it, right? You could add a next step to it. I love the recognition associated with being a professor that you are respected and knowledgeable, right? In some ways, an authority on certain things. And I love that. Could I be more well known, more well respected, more seen more as someone knowledgeable on something? Sure. Right. And are there platforms that could give that to you? Sure. Right. Would there be opportunity to spend more time talking, influencing other people? More people, right? Could I fill an auditorium and teach an auditorium, an entire convention center, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could I be a Tony Robbins style speaker and have that level of engagement, have that level of impact and things like that? Yes. I feel like I get that from the classroom, but could I do it on a grander scale? Yes.
Okay, so let me a second follow-up question to that. So grander scale.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything on that grander scale that you feel would be it almost unchecks a box? Is there a downside to that?
Most definitely. I mean,
and I guess that's my question, is because if it unchecks one but checks another, there's still not one job that checks every single box. It's that balance that you're trying to find for that contentment that you're going for.
Right. I think it's a theoretical job, right? How do you combine?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I say. Is there a practical job? Yeah, and my answer to that question was, I don't think there's a real job, a practical job speaking, that is perfect for me. There's stuff that I'm willing to give up to get something else. But you're right. Obviously, there is a theoretical job that I can make based on different qualifications of pulling different things or different characteristics from different jobs. But as of right now, I don't think that there is one single job that is what I would consider to check every single box for me. And I don't think there is that for anyone. I don't think there is a single job that's out there that is a real job that you can apply for right now that absolutely checks every box that makes you content. And I think that's a really important key thing to point out to our listeners, is because I think a lot of people are searching for that one perfect thing, and there's not one perfect. That's the reason why I brought that question up.
That's a great question. And, honestly, I think we'd all do better to think of it like that, right? It goes back to that whole journey point of view. There is no end goal, but there is the pursuit of ideals, right? And the harder you pursue it, the more likely potentially you are to achieve more of those elements in a singular job, task, or function. I will quote the late Stephen Hawking as saying, never stop working. Work is your reason for existence, right? But that being said, I think what he was saying was more along the lines of what we contribute to society, what we contribute to things outside of ourselves, and how that results in contentment for ourselves, right? Whether that outside contribution is to our families, whether it's to friends, whether it's to society at large, whatever it is, right? Those types of things. So if you continue the pursuit for whatever the ideal you hold high in that way, then honestly, that is the perfect career for you, right? The active pursuit, right? And enjoying, right? Being contented by that actual pursuit. But to the extent you can recognize those things about yourself that need to be fulfilled, and that's the hard part, right?
Yeah.
Everything's a trade-off, right? If you know you need quality time, but you also know you want the recognition and prestige, well, one does tend to conflict with the other. Recognition and prestige comes with diligent effort directed towards that usually, right? You want to make yourself famous, you really have to work for it, right?
Yeah.
Or at least you have to work for it to stay there, right? I was, as crazy as it sounds, and you say, well, what about people who just kind of stumbled on the fame, right? Type scenario. And everybody points out the Kim Kardashian type scenario. I did see something on TV where it showed what her day looks like. And it is exhausting. I mean, the hours of preparing your physical, appearance, the planning on how you're going to present yourself to media in a way that needs to be in a certain sense shocking, needs to be in a certain sense, right? It is still a compounded effort, right? It is a ton of effort in pursuit of what you want or what you're looking for. Okay.
Yeah, I do think, like, I'm a firm believer that there's, like I said before, I don't think there's anything perfect out there for everyone, unless, I guess you would say, you created it. But again, I feel like in order to get something, you have to give up something. Mm-hmm. It's was it the Newton's second law of motion or whatever? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Mm-hmm.
You have to give some, in order to get something, you have to give up something. And a lot of people say, well, I want to be the movie star, but are you willing to give up what is essentially your freedom to get to that status? Because if you go anywhere as a celebrity, you tend to get mobbed. Like, you have no just being able to be that common person anymore to really be able to experience whatever you're trying to go to. If it's going to the beach, you can't just sit out. You're always going to have somebody come and take pictures, ask an autograph, whatever. Are you willing to give that up? And some people are, and that's fine. Again, it's what you're willing to give up to get something.
Yeah, and
it's understanding that.
Having to stay within the bounds of, even to be a movie star, you have to stay within the confines of what is required of you by your managers. You have to stay in the graces of the directors. You have to understand, what you have to accept the failure and the rejection, which will inevitably come the same way that instilled pursuit. Like, it's still a ton of effort. It's still a ton of concerted effort. And I think, as you can see, based upon, things like alcoholism, drug addiction, suicide rates, things like that, even things like you reach high levels of accomplishment and people are seeking the notoriety in a given field or something like that. And then yet they're still not contented by it, right? They got there and there's something still missing. And they turn to other things like, addictive personalities tend to be closely linked. There's strong research out there. There's a great research study that linked the addiction habits of soldiers during Vietnam, right? Because there were so many opium dens and the opioid trade was so prevalent there in Vietnam during that, 10, 12 years worth of conflict. So many soldiers were in effect addicted, right, while being there, but so few of them came back to the United States and continued their habits or addictions. And the ones that did, it was closely related to contentment and quality of life, right? Yeah. Their level of contentment that they experienced on a daily basis was the primary determinant of maintained, addiction and things like that. And it just goes back to that general understanding that, okay, you have an idea of something, even then, most of those soldiers probably thought just getting home was the objective. But then that didn't do it, right? What they were looking for, they achieved it, but there were still things missing, right? There were internal factors. And, that was a very difficult time in the United States history, right? Service members and things like that weren't celebrated, right? So you came back and in many circles, you weren't a hero, you were a villain, right? Type scenario. So, in my humble opinion, that wasn't, the brightest hour for the United States, maybe whether it's on the decision to be there in the first place, but also society's reaction to those who not necessarily volunteered, right? This was during the draft, we're told, type scenario. So socially, it was a very difficult time. Politically, it was a very difficult time. And all those types of things, it led to a lot of problems in people's lives on both sides of the coin. And the happiness of potentially returning, having that experience over, you thought that was the goal. You thought that was the end journey, but that didn't do it. And for me, that was just, a widespread example of it is more about the journey, right? It is more about you have to be concerned about constantly focusing on those internal needs and desires. And sometimes they'll change throughout your life. But if you focus too much on an end goal or what you think is where you want to be, then you'll sacrifice long-term contentment, and you ultimately miss out on things. So with that being said, it goes down to the only thing we do in life more than our jobs is sleep. That's it. I mean, you're not going to have another activity you do more than concerted effort towards your career, job, path, whatever you're doing. So with that being said, individuals who think that the end goal is all that matters and don't focus on pursuing a career path or field where every job you are in, right, just meets your internal needs more than the next. That if you can't recognize those things about yourselves about yourself that is not being fulfilled, and then take a positive move to make it more fulfilled. I watch people all the time who get promoted into misery, right? My brother was a great example. He got promoted to a job that made him miserable, and he left the field and industry completely because the external environment didn't align with internal needs. Early on, it did. He got himself promoted into a position which wasn't necessarily along a particular career path. It was a natural step, I would say, right, to be promoted, but he could have avoided it. He could have gone other directions, and honestly, he should have. But it worked out great for him. He's in a career path that he enjoys more now, right? It more aligns with his internal needs and wants, and that's great. So there's no single answer, but that recognition, I think, is going to help people a great deal in their determination of what to pursue, how a career path relates to your internal needs and wants, and thus motivation.
Yeah, I think we've hit this one pretty hard, and I do have one other question before we wrap up the show. This whole show has been about choosing a career, and we hope the listeners are taking this advice and seeing what things they need to consider when they're choosing their career. I always see choosing a career as a system of steps. First step, second, whatever. What would you consider the first step to choosing a career for our listeners?
Understanding yourself.
Okay.
Experience everything out there and see, why does this experience, why does this environment, why does being around these people, why does doing this thing, why does the potential outcome of what I'm doing, any of those things, why does that resonate with me? And will it keep me engaged? And if you can recognize those types of things, then you can start aligning yourself with a career path. And
I would agree. I'm going to say it in a different terminology, though. And I'm going to actually, I thought this was what you would have gone with, as much as a common theme with you, is understand what makes you content.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same what you just said, but I think a lot of people do look at what makes them happy at this moment. And I think it is more about what makes you content in the long run. Understanding what your priorities are. So what you're willing to give up in order to get something else, I think is a huge thing that needs to be considered. And don't be so narrow-minded when it comes to careers. The funny thing about my dad being from another country, they tend to say, okay, if you're going to college, you're going to be a lawyer, a doctor, or a lawyer, doctor, or engineer. Yeah. And I didn't want to be. I mean, obviously, I went through and did 2 years, like I said, with being a doctor, but I didn't want that. There are other options out there, and so just understand what drives you, what motivates you, what things you need in order to be content. I will say this on another episode, maybe one in the very near future, maybe the next one or two. I do think we should have an episode that really focuses in on this career path, career choice thing, but the effects of finances in that. Because I do think a lot of people use that as trying to decide if they want to go that career path or that career, and they want that 6 or 7 figure job, but I don't think they necessarily know what all it entails in order to get that in some areas. Mm-hmm. So I think we could actually have a whole episode just specifically on using finances as a variable when it comes to choosing a career.
Oh yeah, definitely. Money as a motivator, and also, money as a limiting factor, a constraint. So
it's going to be interesting to hear about that one. So
absolutely.
Well, this has been a great one. This has been a pretty deep episode. I like this one a lot. I like when we're able to go in and kind of do kind of more personal things, talk about more personal things than these specific topics. So you got anything to say before we head out?
Hit us up on our website. Hit us up on the social media channels. Give us all the stars on your favorite podcast.
Like a whole bag of them.
All of them. Give us extra stars. That type of thing. Share us with friends, family, colleagues, anybody you think could use this or would be interested in it. tell them about us, and we would appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, we'll see you then. Goodbye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Reschool'd podcast. Be sure to head over to reschool'd.com for news and other information on things we're getting into.